You can tell a lot about a home within seconds of seeing it, not by how much is inside it, but by how it feels when you take it in as a whole. Some spaces carry a sense of calm that is difficult to explain, while others feel slightly unsettled, even when everything appears to be in place. In most cases, the difference has very little to do with quantity, and much more to do with what has been allowed to remain over time, and what has quietly been let go. Homes that feel balanced and comfortable to live in often share one common trait, which is not excess or perfection, but a quiet level of awareness about what still serves a purpose and what no longer does. In this video, we will go through 25 things people gradually remove from their homes over time, not all at once and not out of pressure, but through small decisions that build over the years, each one contributing in its own way to a space that feels easier to live in. Before going further, take a moment to think about your own surroundings and consider whether there is something you have been meaning to clear out but have continued to leave for later. Not because it is important, but simply because it has been there for so long. There is no need to act on it immediately, but noticing it is often where the process begins. It often starts at the entrance, with something as ordinary as the doormat, which tends to be overlooked precisely because it is used so often and rarely questioned. Over time, it becomes worn down, losing its texture, its structure, and the sense that it was ever intentionally chosen, which subtly affects how the entrance feels each time you step in or out. Replacing it does not require much effort, but it does require attention, and choosing something simple, durable, and still visually clean can quietly restore a sense of care to the very first point of contact with your home. Another place where things build up without much notice is the closet, where different hangers, older clothing, and items that no longer fit your current routine gradually take up more space than they need to. This does not just affect how the closet looks, but also how it functions, because a crowded space slows down simple decisions and makes everyday routines feel more complicated than they should be. Reducing what is no longer worn and creating some level of consistency, even in something as small as the type of hangers you use, can make the entire space feel easier to manage without requiring a complete overhaul. The refrigerator door is another area where accumulation happens quietly, as notes, magnets, reminders, and small pieces of information begin to gather over time, eventually creating a surface that feels busier than it needs to be. Because it is seen so often, it becomes familiar, and familiarity makes it easy to overlook how much visual activity it creates in a space that benefits from clarity. Clearing it, even once, often makes the kitchen feel more settled, not because anything important has been removed, but because unnecessary distraction has been reduced. In both the kitchen and the bathroom, there's also a tendency for half-used or expired products to remain long after they have served their purpose, and often because there is no immediate reason to remove them. These items gradually take up space, making surfaces harder to maintain and creating a sense of incompleteness that is easy to ignore but still present. Going through them one by one, without rushing and letting go of what is no longer used or effective, allows the space to become more functional and easier to keep in order. Small items placed around the home also tend to accumulate in subtle ways, often starting as temporary placements that slowly become permanent without intention. A few objects on a table, a few more on a shelf, and over time, these small additions begin to affect how the space feels as a whole. Clearing a single surface completely and then returning only what truly belongs there can make a noticeable difference, not because everything has been removed, but because what remains has been chosen more carefully. Storage is often handled in the most practical way possible, which is why plastic containers and bins are so commonly used. But when they remain visible in living areas, they can shift the atmosphere of the room without it being immediately obvious. Instead of feeling like a place to relax, the space begins to feel like it is still holding tasks or unfinished organization, which changes how comfortable it feels to spend time there. Moving these items out of sight or replacing them with materials that feel softer and more integrated into the room can make a quiet but meaningful difference. Shelves in particular tend to become full over time, not because of a single decision, but because of many small additions that eventually leave no space in between. When everything is placed side by side without pause, the eye has nowhere to rest, and the room begins to feel more active than it needs to be. Removing even a few items and allowing space between what remains gives each object more presence and makes the overall space feel more balanced. Finally, there is the overall use of color within a room, which can influence how a space feels more than most people realize, especially when too many tones are competing at once. Even when each item is appealing on its own, the combination can feel unsettled if there is no clear direction. Simplifying the palette, even slightly, and allowing one tone to lead while others support it can bring a sense of cohesion that makes the room easier to experience and more comfortable to spend time in. As you move further into the home, there are certain details that begin to stand out more clearly, not because they are large or obvious, but because they subtly influence how the entire space is experienced over time. One of these is the presence of visible cables and loose wires, which tend to form gradually as more devices are added. Chargers are left plugged in, and extension cords are used without much thought about where they sit. At first, they seem harmless and easy to ignore, but once you begin to notice them, it becomes clear how much they interrupt the visual flow of a room, making it feel less settled than it could be. Taking a little time to guide them out of sight, whether through simple clips, routing them along edges, or gathering them neatly behind furniture, often brings an immediate sense of order that is out of proportion to the effort required. While in a similar way, window coverings play a much larger role than most people expect, particularly when they are either too short or too heavy for the space they are in. Curtains that stop awkwardly or block more light than necessary can make a room feel smaller and more closed in, even during the day, when natural light would otherwise lift the entire atmosphere. Adjusting their placement so they sit higher, or choosing lighter materials that allow more daylight to pass through, can change not only how the room looks, but how it feels to spend time there over the course of the day. Seating areas also reveal a lot about how a space functions, especially when cushions and throw pillows have lost their shape over time, becoming flat and unstructured without anyone really noticing when the change happened. What once felt supportive and comfortable begins to look tired, and even if the furniture itself is still in good condition, the overall impression shifts in a subtle but noticeable way. Refreshing the inserts or replacing them when needed restores both comfort and appearance, making the space feel more inviting without requiring a full replacement of the furniture itself. The surfaces we use most often, such as coffee tables, tend to reflect whatever is happening in daily life, which means they can quickly become a collection point for items that were never meant to stay there permanently. Remote controls, cups, papers, and small objects begin to gather, not out of neglect, but simply because the space is convenient. Over time, this turns what could be a calm focal point into a surface that feels unsettled and slightly overwhelming. You're reducing what stays on the table to just a few intentional items, creates a sense of order that is immediately noticeable, while still keeping the space functional for everyday use. There is also the matter of artificial plants, which are often chosen for convenience, especially in spaces where maintaining real plants may not be practical. However, when they are visibly artificial, with stiff shapes or unnatural colors, they tend to draw attention in a way that does not contribute positively to the space. Replacing them with something more natural in appearance, or choosing a real plant that requires minimal care, can introduce a sense of life and softness that is difficult to replicate otherwise. Walls, too, carry their own kind of weight, particularly when they are filled with artwork that no longer reflects your current taste or the feeling you want the room to have. Over time, preferences change, but what is on the wall often stays the same, simply because it has been there for so long. Taking the time to remove or replace pieces that no longer feel right allows the room to better reflect who you are now, rather than who you were when those choices were first made. In many homes, personal photographs are placed in multiple areas, which adds warmth and familiarity, but when they are spread across too many surfaces, they can begin to compete with one another rather than stand out. Bringing them together into a single, thoughtfully arranged space allows each image to be seen more clearly, not while also reducing the sense of visual busyness that comes from having them scattered throughout the home. In the bathroom, something as simple as the condition of towels can influence how the entire space feels, especially when they become worn, mismatched, or lose their softness over time. Even when everything else is in place, these small details can make the room feel less cared for than it actually is. Replacing them with a consistent set in tones that feel calm and easy on the eyes can quietly elevate the space without requiring any major changes. Furniture size is another factor that often goes unnoticed, particularly when a piece is slightly too large for the room it occupies. It may have been chosen for comfort or appearance, but if it limits movement or makes the space feel tight, it gradually affects how the room functions. Adjusting the layout, or in some cases, choosing something better suited to the scale of the room, allows the space to feel more open and easier to move through. Floor coverings, especially when there are several small rugs placed throughout a single room, can break up the visual flow and make the space feel less connected. While each rug may serve a purpose, too many of them can create a sense of fragmentation that is felt even if it is not consciously noticed. Using fewer, more appropriately sized rugs helps bring the space together and creates a more continuous, settled appearance. Light, in all its forms, plays a central role in how a home feels, and heavy window coverings or dark materials can limit how much natural light enters the space. When light is restricted, rooms tend to feel more closed and less inviting, even when everything else is in order. Allowing more natural light in, whether by adjusting curtains or choosing lighter fabrics, can make the entire environment feel more open and comfortable throughout the day. There are also everyday items, such as cleaning products, that are often left in plain sight for convenience, but their packaging is usually designed for function rather than appearance. Bright colors and bold labels can stand out in a way that disrupts the visual calm of a space, especially in kitchens and bathrooms. Transferring these items into simple containers or storing them out of sight helps maintain a more consistent and settled look without affecting their accessibility. As you continue to look around the home more carefully, there are a few final areas that tend to have a stronger impact, not because they are more important in isolation, but because they influence how everything else comes together. One of these is the overall direction of the space, particularly when it has been shaped heavily by trends that no longer feel as relevant or comfortable as they once did. At the time, those choices may have felt current and exciting, but as time passes, they can begin to feel slightly out of place, not because they are wrong, but because they were never meant to last. Shifting away from pieces that were chosen purely for trend and focusing instead on items that feel steady, familiar, and easy to live with creates a foundation that does not need to be constantly updated. This does not require replacing everything, but simply recognizing what still feels right and what was only meant for a particular moment. Lighting in a broader sense also plays a role that is often underestimated, especially when it is limited to basic or harsh fixtures that do little to support the overall atmosphere of the room. The way light spreads, the warmth of its tone, and even the position of a fixture can influence how comfortable a space feels, particularly in the evening when natural light is no longer present. Making small adjustments here, whether by changing a fixture or introducing softer lighting sources, often has a noticeable effect on how the room is experienced without requiring significant effort. The entryway as a whole is another area that deserves attention, not just as a physical space, but as a point of transition between the outside world and the interior of the home. When it becomes a place where shoes are left scattered, bags are dropped, and items accumulate without a clear place, it sets a tone of disorder that can carry into the rest of the home. Bringing a sense of structure to this area, even in a simple way, allows it to function as a calm starting point rather than a source of distraction. Furniture placement also has a subtle but important influence, particularly when every piece is pushed directly against the walls in an attempt to create more space. While this may seem practical, it often leaves the center of the room feeling disconnected, as though the elements within it are not truly working together. Allowing a small amount of space between furniture and walls, and then arranging pieces in a way that supports natural movement in conversation, creates a more balanced and comfortable environment. And finally, there is one idea that sits beneath all of this, which is less about any single item and more about how decisions are made over time. It is the understanding that not everything needs to be kept simply because it has been there for a long time. Some things no longer serve a clear purpose, and they no longer contribute to how you want your home to feel. Holding on to them is often a matter of habit rather than intention. Letting them go does not take anything away from the home. In many cases, it allows what truly matters to become more visible. When each item in a space either serves a purpose or adds something meaningful to the environment, well, the overall feeling of the home begins to shift in a way that is both noticeable and lasting. It becomes easier to move through, easier to maintain, and easier to enjoy on a daily basis. As you look around your own space, there is no need to change everything at once or to approach it with pressure. Even a small adjustment, made with awareness, can begin to change how the space feels. And over time, those small changes tend to build into something much more significant than they first appear. If you found yourself reflecting on even one of these points, then this has already served its purpose. You can take your time with the rest. If this video gave you something to reflect on, even in a small way, then you can support it in a few simple ways. You can start by giving it a like, which helps more people come across it, and end by subscribing if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. You can also share it with someone who would appreciate a calmer, more intentional home. And if you're seeing the hype option on this video, you can tap that as well. Hype is a newer feature that helps push a video out to more viewers, especially when it's still growing, and it only takes a second to use. It's one of the simplest ways to give a video a small boost so it reaches the right audience. If something stood out to you, feel free to leave a comment as well. Even a short thought or reflection makes a difference, and it often helps others see the video in a more personal way. Take your time with everything we've covered, and I'll see you in the next one.